Welcome, guys, back to our seventh episode of our Lifting Nerds podcast. Just me and Brandon here today, and we wanted to share a little bit on some of what our clients are struggling with, and a lot of info on a lot of some of our clients and some of the problems they actually do run into are some of the visual results that you might be seeing. So if you have been lifting for quite a while and you're not seeing results, we're gonna give some tips on how you can actually measure these objective what do you call that? Objective results, and what to look for if you are actually taking progress photos. And we'll teach you a little bit of tools on things to look for and how you can actually measure if you're actually making results. But before that, we what is it? Late March. It's like late March right now, yeah?
Yeah, March 19th today. So,
And how time flies. You are 6 weeks from your BC Cup show, yes? And it's also the 6 weeks from WNBF Vancouver show. I can't wait for everybody who's going to be taking part in the Vancouver show. I'll see you all. I'll see you all there. I won't see you until much later. Shows happen on the same day, so I can't support you.
no stress, man. No stress.
But how's prep? Let's talk a little bit about how's prep for you.
It's been good, man. Like definitely been seeing more weight drop these past two weeks. Um, besides what was it last not last night, but the night before. I got some like stomach virus or something, so I was kind of in the washroom most of the night, and then the morning was kind of iffy, and then last like last evening, it was like I was pretty much fully recovered from it, so I don't know what was going on there. But other than that, man, things have been good. Like I still think this prep so far has been like the most successful in terms of like reducing the prep symptoms more so towards the end of this prep. Well, I guess we're still got a ways to go, but like I haven't been noticing any crazy symptoms when it comes to energy, when it comes to hunger. The only major symptoms that, even with my last prep, I had, but it's more so just the psychological ones, where I almost feel like I need to be doing more. Like there's this great sense of like, okay, I got to be doing more of this, I got to be doing more of that, or I just feel like my like anxiety or my urge, like, okay, I need to be like doing something, is really kicking in, which is good from a productive standpoint, but it's getting hard to like wind down. So that's pretty much how like I've been doing, like in terms of like the symptoms, but like the physique's definitely tightening up. Like I'm noticing like my shoulders, my arms, they always get lean first, but like they're getting like real close to where I want them to be. Um, abs are coming in more, obliques are coming in more, legs are even starting to come in, glutes have like a very faint striation to them and good lighting. So like physique's definitely going in the right direction. And yeah, just excited to see how these next six I guess 6.5 weeks go.
Yeah, six and a half
Um,
weeks. How far do
how
you
about
think
you,
you're
man?
away from your uh what is that word? I wouldn't like ideal physique that you visualize yourself on stage.
Like how much weight am I away from it?
Probably, or even like just visually.
Yeah, so for in terms of like the body weight, so I was actually 174.8 this morning. So like I'm having a feeling I'll probably be around like the 170 to 173 range for like my scale weight. In terms of my actual look, yeah, I think I have maybe a little bit more to come off in like the obliques, like the lower obliques area, the lower back area is always that last place
Yeah.
that takes some time to come off. So I think if I lose that next like 3 to 5 pounds, I think that's where I'm going to be looking quite crispy there.
Yeah.
When it comes to like classic physique, I have a feeling I'm probably going to have to get under the 170 mark, but Yeah, no, I think I'll be a couple pounds up from the last time I competed, so I think I should be good for it.
Yeah.
How about you, man? How's the last couple weeks been for your prep?
For me, it's a little rough. But for stage weight, honestly, I had a deload, and then after the deload, I went all the way down to 63.8. So wait, let me just put that back in pounds for you. Sorry, 63.8. That was my lowest. So I was at 140 pounds. I was at 140.4 pounds. That was my lowest so far in this prep, up to date. And after the deload week, we began training volume again. Uh, I think food was roughly about the same. Calorie was about the same, and my body weight jumped back up to 146, if I'm correct. And I hate this kilo and pound thing. Oh, sorry, 140. Yeah, 141, 142, not 146. I correct myself.
I was
So
like, that's a big
141.
jump.
So
Yeah.
yeah, we jumped up about 1 or 2 pounds back up. Mainly, we were guessing it's due to just after training, there's, like minor inflammations and things like that. However, in the mirror, we are seeing the physique coming in a little bit tighter. I am actually in the very same situation as you. I do have that lower oblique, not the lower back, but just that lower oblique on the side. I'm really having difficulty identifying if it's actually body fat or water or it's just skin. So that is just something that I'm not sure of. But obliques are coming in, abs are coming in, even abs are coming in on a situation where I'm not even flexing and we're see it, quite nicely. That's where I'm currently at. However, body weight is sitting still this morning at 141.8. Therefore, it's the needle's not really moving in terms of body weight so far. Um, Talked to Brian. I asked, should I really be concerned on that? And he said, yeah, it's okay. Usually I'm mainly pretty lean at this point. And we've got, for me, we wait, Kelowna is 8 weeks or 9 weeks.
Yeah. So it'd be
It'll be
so
eight
it was
weeks.
nine
Yeah, it'll
weeks.
be
Like
8 weeks by the end of this week.
yeah,
Yeah, it'll
yeah,
be 8 weeks. So we got roughly about 2 months. I'm assuming we'll probably be feeding 2 to 3 weeks away from actual show day.
gotcha.
So I think I may not reach down to the 136 pound mark that we set in the beginning.
Yeah. Which is probably a good sign because like if you don't have to go that far down, man, like that's a good sign that you gained a lot of tissue, right?
Yeah, like I would hope so.
Yeah.
I would really, really hope so. Um, However, I am quite happy. Now I'm very, very lean. I'm quite happy on what this off season has brought. I could definitely see uh, major improvements on the chest, the triceps, and the delts. That is something that now I'm very lean. I look at previous pictures back in 2022. It's a very obvious improvement. So I'm quite happy with that. But speaking of which, um, I just want to rewind back a little bit while we're talking about what our potential stage weight was going to be. Um, that so we like see even for myself, we were expecting our stage weight to probably be about 136, 138 for myself. And you're a little bit heavier from your previous prep. You're expecting yourself to be about 170.
Yeah.
So
Because
we've
like
been we've been sort of doing this, and for me, I'm still guessing our stage weight. And if you guys have not seen Brandon's post, he made a recent post on, setting benchmarks for your bodybuilding show. I think we talked about this before, but I think we want to go back again and talk about this. How would you determine on a first timer if they want to like compete regardless in men's physique, classic physique, bodybuilding. How would somebody determine their first weight, or how would you help them determine it during a call?
Yeah, so I would always try to get progress photos from them just to see how things are sitting. Try to make sure they're in decent light, like in window lighting or natural lighting, just to really make sure that it's not just like down lighting and you're seeing everything popping really well. Because then that can be a little bit more harder to determine. But it's more so yeah, looking at fine things like, hey, like, do they have, like, are their abs in right now? Can you see like their obliques if they're flexing? Can you, with their back pose, like how much detail is there? And then we can also have a look at maybe previous times when they got to a really low weight, like when I did like a fat loss phase or something like that. If they have a look at those photos, see how lean they look there, and based off of that kind of information, we can, like with an experienced eye, you can kind of calculate, okay, like how much weight do we think that needs to come off in order to get there? I usually like to have it lower than what I possibly think it is, just so we have some extra time, so we can even possibly, like, again, feed into the show if we're ahead of schedule. Um, so yeah, just looking at those kind of markers, it's again, it's gonna be a bit of a guesstimation. Most people, even with like say like a DEXA scan or something like that, if you can get access to that, there's still gonna be some level of error there. Um, but it just comes with time. But I would say, like, if you're somebody brand new to it and you're like, oh, I think I'm gonna be this weight, take literally 10 pounds, maybe even 15 pounds off that weight, and then set that target, and that's probably what your target's gonna be. Um, just because it's most people generally for their first show don't understand how lean you actually need to get to that stage conditioning. Because in great lighting, like people, like when I posted one of the photos or the videos on my Instagram in like crazy down lighting with a massive pump, people are like, man, you're so lean already, like you don't even have to get much leaner. I'm like, man, like if you see me under the actual lights at this weight, there's still a decent amount of body fat that actually needs to come off of. So like, yeah, there's a difference between that kind of beach, kind of that lean kind of Instagram look, and like being absolutely peeled for your show. So
I agree. I agree. Where lighting can play a big factor here. When lighting is more favorable, then it looks more appealing for social media for sure. However, the second part of the question is now we've determined a stage weight for first timers. Something just came across my mind when I just want to pop in is how do you transition from somebody who's a GP
yeah,
into somebody who wants to compete the first time?
yeah.
What does
So a
that
general
transition
pop
look like?
Yeah. So with the general population person or gen pop person, it's usually you've built these like staple habits with them. So either it be tracking food or understanding portion sizes or like a flexible meal plan or something along the lines of that. Um, or certain eating behaviors depending on how they generally what generally works best for them. So you have these eating behaviors, you have the consistency with the gym for the most part. So when you transition them over, it's usually not too bad, especially if you have in the back of your mind an idea of that they want to compete, because then you can kind of build these habits around like your training, your nutrition, your lifestyle, so that when you're transitioning to competing, it's just a little, just kind of one step up from what you're already doing. So just kind of getting into the mindset of, okay, like there's going to be a bit more restriction here. You're probably gonna like energy and everything. Like, going through like the symptoms with them and like what to actually expect is going to be a huge thing, because sometimes people see these shredded physiques online or they're following like Sam Sulek. Like another point I wanted to say before I go into this is like, you mentioned with Sam Sulek how he just looks fucking crazy in like his photos and his videos, and then when he's on stage, he's like, "Oh, he looks good, but he doesn't look as shredded." That's a exact thing that typically happens for most people. Is they look really shredded in this crazy lighting, and they go on stage, and people are like, "Oh, like he doesn't look as lean as like he did in this photo." And it's because of the lighting. They're playing with lighting. But to get back to it, yeah, just going through the symptoms that people are gonna expect to feel. in terms of energy drops, in terms of like the brain fog, less focus, um, maybe having a hard it's just going to put a little bit more pressure on other things outside of lifting too, just with like being a bit more moody, a bit more short and stuff like that. So just kind of going through what this process is actually going to look like, and like how it's probably going to be more difficult than you think it's going to be in some aspects. It might be easier in others. Like some people think like, oh, I'm not only be able to eat these specific foods. You can still be flexible with your food and everything like that, as long as you're hitting targets and as long as you're controlling for volumes. Like if you're just eating protein bars and uh, like protein powder and then having candy and stuff like that, you're not going to be satiated. You're not going to have a good time during prep. So keeping the good structure with foods. Um, but I think I'm getting a little off track here. Was there any specific points that you wanted me to highlight with the transition over?
Yeah, yeah. So I think you make a really good point on just the difference between the what their current training program is and things to expect when they transition into doing their first show. Maybe I wanted to highlight a little bit on would there be any difference between their training volume or their frequency in their training?
Yeah, so it would depend on where they're starting off with. Like if they're say they're training like 2, 3 times a week, like they're not going that many times to the gym. Yeah, we'd probably want to bring it up a little bit more, bring it to like 4 times, maybe 5 times per week. If it's somebody that's literally training like 5, 6 times a week, you might even expect to pull down the training towards the end just to help manage fatigue and stuff. So it would just, yeah, we just need to see the context before, like what that looks like, what the eating behaviors look like, what that transition is going to look like. If somebody's coming to me, a GP, and like a Gen Pop person, and like they don't know what macros are, they're super inconsistent with training, they're having a hard time staying focused on one single goal, and they find themselves jumping around from thing to thing to thing. That's where I always like to have a time frame where, okay, like let's see what we can do within these next couple months. Let's see if we can get you learning macros, see if you can get you learning how to stay consistent with the gym. And once we can do that, then let's transition into prep. Because the worst thing you want to do for a Gen Pop person is like, okay, I want to get healthy, so I want to compete. And then like you're going from like not having these habits down to trying to get all these habits in play while trying to get super lean. And that's where a lot of times people tend to fall apart, is because they don't even have a lot of these things down and they're trying to do so many things and they just get overwhelmed. Whereas like for me and you, like we have these habits pretty well set even in the off season. It might just be a bit looser, but we're still consistent with training. We're still consistent with sleep most of the time. So it's a pretty smooth transition in. So it's not as many extra variables to stress with because it's already become a habit kind of thing.
Yeah, you do mention eating habits, which I think it's a very important. I think it's the most important one from somebody who's a GP and transitioning into prep. Let's say for somebody who trains consistently, I'll maybe give you not a really case study, but an example here. Somebody who trains 2 to 3 times a week, very, very common for Gen Pops. Uh, they they live life. Honestly, they're not a full-time athlete, so they will have social events. They will have many social events. So eating habits are probably not as consistent as like they're able to track everything and their tracking skills are not very, very mature yet. How would you make that transition, or how would you address that to them? Like for per se, giving more context, maybe their job requires them to attend to a lot more social events.
Yeah. And that's where, yeah, if you don't have those skills with eating out, like that's where meal prepping your meals, bringing like your container, like storing in the fridge in the area, or just bringing that to these kind of events. And like typically, if you let somebody know, like of your friends in a like or a work environment know that, okay, like I'm in prep, this is what is required for me to get to where I need to be. Most people are going to be like, okay, yeah, no stress or anything like that. So yeah, just having that structure of, okay, like having those meals prepped out, weighed out, so that we can be nice and dialed in. Um, And then just for those social events, yeah, well, for that gym person, just letting them know that maybe like for you're probably not going to want to go to as many social events as you, or if you're going to a lot right now, you might need to reduce them a little bit as you get closer to your show. Especially if you're somebody that you find you tend to give in to when people are like, oh, just have this, or just have this, or have a couple drinks. If you find you're a person that always generally tends to give into that, it might be one of those things that you do have to pull away from a little bit and just let the person know, okay, this is my goal. Like I'm really focused on this right now. We can do some other things together. Like that's not around food, and that's maybe not around like partying. Just to still keep that relationship going well, but it's just yeah, pulling away from some of those things is gonna make your life a lot easier. And like if you have these events and you're staying up till like 1, 2 in the morning, like every single weekend, yeah, it's probably not going to be the best for like sleep quality. Like mood's going to be fluctuating a lot more. Hunger the next day will probably be fluctuating a lot more. So trying to make sure that you can still have some of that, but have not as much as maybe before.
Yeah, that's a pretty good practical way. I would like to just sort of piggyback off what you just said in terms of their job culture, and some the GP may require um, to attend some company events, even on behalf of, the company. They might have to go to events where they have drinks and a little bit of champagne, and maybe just attend a, I don't know, what, maybe just like a reception or something like that.
Like a retreat kind of thing.
Yeah, yeah, a retreat, and we attend weddings and things like that. So all these social events will add up in it just come together in like maybe once a month or maybe twice a month, and it will tax eventually at the end of your entire prep, little bit by bit by little. And I think there's something in Asian cultures where they have a family gathering, and you say no to the table, and it feels rude. So it's going to be a little challenging for in that scenario where somebody is put in that situation, and to say, pull back on those, it's going to be a little bit challenging. Um, so what I have in this scenario is mainly I'll pre-eat the meal before attending to these. I will still show up. It's a must in some Asian cultures. It's a must that you have to show up to these social events and family gatherings. I'll eat first, and then we attend it. And it's just your best interest to stay away from any sorts of alcoholic drinks, and probably just focus a little bit more on the protein side. And since you're already full from your previous meal, it just tends to fill you up a little bit more, and you just didn't want to eat.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it makes sense, man. And like, well, and that's another thing too. Like, you can still partake in some of those kind of meals. Like, if you have some good planning, if you kind of overestimate things, if you kind of know what's going to be there, and you look up like a homemade recipe ahead of time, or like on MyFitnessPal or whatever tracking app you're using, like look up like the exact thing that you're having, overestimate a little bit. And as long as it's not like happening like 5 times a week where you're having to guess that 5 times a week meal, then I think that's totally fine. Like uh, it depends on the client too, because I've had clients like I had a client like where he was having a family dinner every single Sunday, where he was very loosely tracking. Like he still got his pro card at the end of the day, like doing that every single weekend, and I incorporate that into his refeed. So like I do find there is ways to work around these kind of things and still be able to do it, as long as we're still seeing the right trend with your weight, right trend with your body fat levels, all of this kind of stuff. Because if you're incorporating that, like, say you're trying to do your best to guesstimate it, but we're noticing like every time you do that, your weight jumps up a bunch, and we're not seeing the rate of weight loss for one, then it's like, okay, maybe we're not gonna do this anymore. We're gonna try to pull back on it because we're not seeing the results we want to see. But if we can incorporate those kind of things, um, and still see the progress we want to see. Like that's like the perfect world because it's like you get that little bit of freedom. You don't feel quite so restricted. You have that good family time. You have some tasty meals, but then you also get the fat loss you're wanting. So that's where I find just kind of getting into like the mind of like your client, like what they kind of need. Like if that's like a family routine that they're doing all the time, and if we can figure out a way of still incorporating that so that they're not feeling restricted, that they're not feeling like they're left out of things. A lot of times I find that helps somebody keep going with the prep because the biggest reason a lot of people quit the prep is because they're like, okay, I can't do this, I can't do this, I can't do that. Whereas we want to try our best to still incorporate these things, um, but to the extent that it's going to allow us to still get the end outcome we want.
Yeah, some things I do agree that we have to give up for prep. It, yeah, if you're living a rather unhealthy lifestyle, it's going to be a little bit more challenging. So I agree with what you said in the beginning. I think we gotta first shift your basic lifestyle to fit a similar module to what prep may potentially look like before we make that transition. I think that you make a very, really good point. I want to just rewind a little bit about refeeds, and we've talked about this back, I think season one or season two, I don't remember. However, we're still getting uh, a lot of misinformation on what refeeds actually are. So let's address that. Refeeds are not food. It's not a free meal. So we want to be crystal clear on that. If you are in prep, refeeds are not eat whatever you want, and they're untrackable. So maybe they are a little bit more untrackable, but they can't be 100% untrackable. I'm not sure. I can't give like a good example what untrackable. Maybe dim sum. Dim sum is sort of untrackable.
Yeah, like there's certain meals, like say if somebody makes a homemade meal for you and like they put like say like 30 different ingredients in there and like they don't weigh anything out and they throw that in and then like it's a recipe that's homemade that is not similar to like any other recipes out there. Those kind of things are kind of untrackable where you literally just have to guess what you're putting in. And like those kind of meals, I'm always kind of like, yeah, that's probably not something we want to be throwing in.
Yeah, so still keep a fact like if we do say free meal. We don't see free meal. We'll just say a refeed. May more or less it's the same food, just in a higher volume. So it kind of works. It works out for your weekly caloric intake. Now, um, so we've talked about frequency. We've talked about eat good. What is a good eating habit. We've talked about what is a good volume overall for a first timer to transition into a prep. Now, prep or no prep, we've worked with athletes, we've worked with Gen Pops. Uh, Something that I do run into is we have a lot of Gen Pop asking, when will I see abs? Or when will I see this? When will I see that? Have you ran into similar situations?
Yeah, where they're just curious on like when they're gonna start to see like the end results, or when they're gonna start to see their abs coming in, or when they're gonna actually start to notice like a significant change to their physique.
Yeah. So what would be your a good, tactic for them to, just see their or what maybe I'll re-question that. What is sort of a metric that you would use, an objective uh metric that you would use to measure how do you see visual results for a Gen Pop who trains, say, 2 to 3 times a week?
Yeah. So for the visuals, like progress photos, doing them on a week to week, like for Gen Pop people, I usually have them do them on a month to month basis because like you're not going to see changes usually week to week or even like every 3 weeks. 4 weeks is like that's where you're going to start to notice some change that you can visually see on like a picture. Um, Depending on the individual too, like if your body fat percentage is quite high, like if you're in the 30-40% and you're doing progress photos, it's probably going to be pretty hard to tell the difference. Like you can see around like your waist there how it's like bulging out maybe, or through the side poses, or like you can see minute changes. But yeah, typically if somebody is around like 20% body fat and they're getting down to like 15 or like 10, like you'll see quite a substantial change in the detail coming out. The higher ends is a little bit more challenging, and that's where I like to talk about how clothing's fitting. So if you're noticing, okay, like I'm down like a pant size, or my shirt's a lot looser around my waist, these are some good indicators. Okay, we are 100% seeing some fat loss. And a lot of times with these kind of individuals, especially if they have not even trained before, and they just start resistance training, they start eating more protein, they start eating a decent caloric intake. A lot of times they're going to see a lot of what is known as recomposition, where they're gaining muscle and losing fat at the same time. So that's where like the scale itself, like hopping on the scale every morning, if they're seeing like the weight stay the same, or even possibly even go up a little bit, and they're getting frustrated, that's why I don't like just using the scale, because it's like that may happen, but you may go down a size in your pants and your shirts and stuff like that with that body recomposition. So doing like waist circumference measurements is another key one I always like to throw in with people, especially for looking at the progress photos. We're not seeing quite as much as we're thinking, or um, scale is not saying well quite as much. And if we look at the waist circumference measurement and it's down a decent amount, then we're like, okay, we 100% are losing body fat there. So I always like to use more than one metric, because sometimes one metric can be a little bit hard to decipher if, okay, like how much change has actually been made.
That's a really good one. So same here. I use more than one metric. For my online ones, I use more than one metric. So waist hip ratio one, I've been using recently. The second one, of course, progress photos are going to be an all-time favorite for online. For my in-person ones, I've started to use the not a DEXA scan, those what is those? Those in-body tinnitus scales? Those in yeah.
In body scans.
Yeah, in-body scanner scales. Yeah, they don't tell like 100% truth, maybe just like 50 or maybe 40% of the truth, but it's just a number that we can work with. What was it 1 month ago, 4 weeks ago, and what it was it now? And I've started incorporating one more, which is body metrics. So biometrics, I'm sorry. Now I take the time to measure the circumferences of my clients, basically their neck, delts, arms, legs, waist, the whole shebang. And some of them enjoy it. Some of them enjoy it, and they can see. They'll open the app on their phone. I'll open my app on my phone, and we'll have the results side to side, and we can just see where is improved or where it has stayed the same. So even more metrics for them to show them. We have like we do have some general population that they haven't seen results maybe in like 2 3 months, just due to like lifestyle and social events and just life itself. What would be your not your go-to, but then your words of encouragement in this
Yeah.
scenario?
I always tell them like the more work you put in, like the more you're gonna get out of it. So if you're like say like 90% on point with your training, your nutrition, you're gonna see like 90% of that outcome. If you're on the other end of the spectrum, you're 20% there, you're getting some workouts in, you're doing some things with nutrition, but you're not putting a whole lot of work there, you're not gonna get as much of an outcome. So like if you we want to always be kind of closer to, I wouldn't say we want to be 100%, because like sometimes that gets like you get super OCD, and like if you miss a stress and you stress yourself out, we don't want to get to that point. But we want to be upwards of like that 70 to 90%. Like if your lifestyle maybe 60 to like 80%, like consistent each and every month, and you're gonna make 60 to 70%, 80% of that progress. If you're somebody that's a competition prep client, you're like really serious about this, like, yeah, we want to be up into that 90 to 100% to like dial things in. Um, so just understanding like, okay, how much like the work that you're putting in is going to be correlated with the what you get out of it. So like There will be some people that, yeah, may respond a little bit better based off of like their upbringing. Like if they were into sports, I find if they generally have better eating habits and stuff like that, the transition into like seeing results is probably going to be maybe a little bit quicker than somebody that had really poor eating habits or having a hard time transition into some of these habits. So, um, but that's the thing with some of these individuals. You literally just start walking a bit more and start eating protein in each meal. You can remove a bunch of body fat and see quite a significant change there. I find the people that generally have the hardest time making changes is the ones that continue going from one extreme to the other. So they're like on point for a week, like 100% there. They fall off for like 2, 3 weeks. Then they go back on 100% for a week and they fall off. So for those individuals, I always tell them, okay, like let's just stick to one or two things that we can try to do. Like let's look at and try to break it down into a very simple way that over time is going to have us seeing a good outcome. So if it's like nutrition, like they can't stand tracking, or they just can't get into the groove of tracking right now, let's literally just look at getting protein in each of those meals. Um, if it's somebody that's like can't stand working out, like let's literally just look at getting steps in. Like let's get a certain amount of steps in. Um, like just something that's going to move that needle to having them see progress. And then once they start seeing progress there, then they'll get a bit more motivated. And then that's just going to build onto other habits later down the road. Yeah.
Great point. Great point. I think that's very, very well said. And I think this is something that we gotta highlight for many, many, many people to hear, even for competitors as well. There is one final thing I did want to touch base on is really rewinding back on the beginning of this podcast where we talked about our prep and how me and you were not were the last part of the place that needs to cut is just the lower obliques and lower a little bit for the lower back for you. I think a lot of even GPs struggle with that, and those are the first places a lot of general population that really wants to get rid of. Um, so maybe just a word from us is even though we are in prep and we're really pushing boundaries and pushing our body fat percentage to this low point, if you have seen, Brandon's pictures and even my pictures, we're this lean and we're still holding a little bit on that. It takes that much work just to get rid of it. Now, for beach lean, as you said with Sam Sulek and even just like we do a mini cut, it's still there, yeah? Would you say it's
Yeah, like
manageable?
yeah. So and that's the thing, like with like the body fat there, like it's like for most people, like the average eye, like for the average person looking at you, like they're not gonna be like, oh, like you have like big love handles or anything like that. Like that's they're not gonna really notice that. Just for us, like getting super, super lean, like people don't understand like how like when you get super lean, like things just appear almost like dry and like just very cut in. And if you want that look, um, typically there's body parts that generally take a bit more time to have it come off. So like for most people, yeah, like the lower obliques, lower abs, lower back, glutes, hamstrings, those areas tend to take the most amount of time for body fat to be removed from. So like yeah, like you can't really pinpoint, okay, like I just want to remove fat from here. Like spot reduction, like so there is some research supporting maybe there's some techniques to slightly benefit losing that specific area. It's usually like it's not enough to like you can't just be like 20% body fat and just have absolutely shredded obliques.
Absolutely, absolutely, I agree. And I think I know what you're talking about. And there are not studies, but then there are just genetic gifted individuals who can they're rare. They're very, very rare. So let's take a an average measurement that more of a general population are more or less the same. It does take a lot of work, and it does depend on um, the the genetics of yourself, and there's also the gender side. The females I do find they take a slightly longer to in order to achieve that body fat percentage. So that's what, prepping females are so much more challenging than guys. That guys could just shred down in probably 12, 16 weeks. And so we've talked about this, I think, last episode of the last two episodes where, yeah, I think we talked about a little bit on that, that we need a little bit more time for females as well. Uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, probably one final thing is, what would be your final word of advice for any general population who is actually listening? Now it's March. Some of them are getting ready for their summer bods. What is your last words or advice for them?
Yeah, I would say, yeah, just make sure, like, yeah, if you're wanting to get ready for the summer, like, yeah, start now. Like, we want to make sure we're giving yourself enough time to lose this body fat. Be consistent with the habits. Don't expect to lose, like, you don't want to be losing like 5, 6 pounds a week. You want to be losing probably 1 to 2 pounds per week on average. Be nice and gradual with it. And, like, yeah, use some of these things to gauge how the progress is going, like photos, waist circumference, or waist to hip ratios. Um, if you're somebody that is a competition prep, another one that I forgot to mention is you can even pinch certain parts of your skin to see how thin it is. And like I've done like skin fold measurements and stuff when I was in kinesiology and stuff, and I haven't done them since. But sometimes just pinching certain areas will allow you to understand how much fat is there. So like if like your biceps, most people if you're super lean, it's like paper thin. You want to try to get to, yeah, like that point on your most of your body if you're wanting to compete as a body, but at like the highest level. So like if you're looking at areas you're like, oh, I'm not sure if that's lean enough, literally pinch the skin there and see how thick the skin is. If it's super thin, that's probably a good sign that you're really close to where you need to be. If there's like a big thick amount of skin there or like fat underneath the skin, there's probably a sign that okay, like you still got a little ways to go.
Do you still have that skin fold pinch?
So I don't have the actual device. Like for me, like I like sometimes when I'm just like assessing my physique and like where the body fat is, like I'll just literally like pinch some areas and be like, okay, so we still like it's looking like that compared to like my bicep. I'm like, okay, yeah, we still got a little
So
ways to
your
go there.
fingers are basically your tools, right?
But yeah, like it's obviously not gonna be as accurate as using an actual skin fold and measuring it out, like taking the average of the three and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I do find it's a useful tool to really see like okay, like if it's extremely thin, um, yeah, you're gonna be in a good spot.
Okay. That's very, very good advice. I do agree with a lot of the things that you've mentioned. So even though we are during prep and you are struggling with getting down to, a good body fat, your beach lean physique, reach out to us. Reach out to us. Brandon and I can definitely come and help you. You can find us down at the link below and into our Instagram. And there's a application form, I assume. There's still an application form there on your page. Yeah.
Oh yeah, 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 in the bio there, or you can just DM me like physique, and I can reach out as well.
Yeah. So DM us if you have this goal in mind. It is late March. We are literally it's spring. You believe it? It's spring. So about 2.5 more months, it's going to be summer, camping season, beach season, everything is going to come in. Uh, so if you want that body lean body, or even if you feel like you want to try to step on stage for the first time, just DM us or even submit your application form in new to our bio. We could definitely speak to you about it and meet you guys where you are at. And for that, is there anything you wanted to add?
No, that's everything, man.
All
Yeah.
right. Well, so thanks for you guys for your time and tuning in. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.